The creation of the first atomic bomb was known as the Manhattan Project. The project involved superpower countries, renowned characters, and distinguished scientists, all united with two main purposes: to end World War II and create the bomb before the Nazis. Yet the Manhattan Project also inadvertently influenced many other factors, such as science and society, in ways that still impact us today. According to historian J. Samuel Walker, Truman decided to use the atomic bombs because of 5 main reasons. In 1941, various Army generals had objected against the usage of the atomic bomb. President Truman countered by referring to the atrocities of Pearl Harbor and declaring, "When you have to deal with a beast, you have to treat him as a beast." Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945, after the bombings, marking the official end of World War II. The next reason that the bombs were detonated lies in all the efforts and investments in the bombs, being an estimate of $1,889,604,000 by the end of 1945. It took the aid of thousands of engineers and officials and a vast amount of resources. At the time the Manhattan Project was developed, World War II had many people worried. The Nazi scientific team had found a way to split the uranium atom, which produces the energy necessary to create a weapon of mass destruction. This threatened the entire world, for the Nazis were one step ahead of everyone else. An Italian scientist known as Enrico Fermi had also managed to produce an atomic fission of an uranium isotope in 1934. He then traveled to the United States in 1941 and joined Albert Einstein and the Uranium Committee, a title used to disguise the experiments that would compete against the Nazis. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union and took possession over its laboratories and equipment. This forced the Allied forces to speed up their research and come to a final decision of making the atomic bomb. But before that came a tedious and difficult process. Later, on October 9, 1941, Vannevar Bush, the lead scientist in the scientific department, communicated to President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Vice President Henry A. Wallace that the making of the atomic bomb was feasible. Roosevelt then agreed to the creation of the bomb, granting aid from the Army, if needed, and plenty of financial support. Desperate to find the perfect bomb ingredient after much trial and error, the group of scientists led by Enrico Fermi searched for the best possible element. That element was uranium-235, a variation of uranium. However, uranium-235 was not an ideal ingredient, for it was very unstable and extremely rare. Yet knowing that the Germans were also racing to develop the atomic bomb, the scientists decided to use uranium-235 as the main ingredient for the bomb. Isotopes are atoms belonging to the same element. 4 ways of separating isotopes exist. During the project, scientists tried 3 methods. The most efficient method was the centrifuge. In a sealed chamber, particles of UF6, a compound used in the uranium enrichment process, were shot with abundant pressure into 2 different funnels, one having a larger vacuum than the other. Particles that are more dense were attracted to the funnel with the larger vacuum, while the less dense particles were attracted to the shorter vacuum. The scientists produced a total of 64 kilograms. Mark Walker teaches nuclear history at the Union College in New York. He received a PhD from Princeton University, and he's the author of Nazi Science: Myth, Truth, and the German Atomic Bomb.
And so between January and June of 1942, that's half a year. In January of 42, the Americans and Germans were pretty much tied as far as working on an atomic bomb. And by June of 1942, the Americans were way in front. By June of 42, the Americans got as far as the Germans did by the end of the war. And then, of course, the Americans continued working after June of 42. And the Americans, what did the Americans do what the Germans didn't do? Well, they dedicate almost tens of thousands of workers and scientists and engineers join the American project.
In April 1943, the work for designing the bombs, codenamed Y-12 and X-10, began in Los Alamos, New Mexico. J. Robert Oppenheimer had become the new leading scientist, and he contributed greatly to the engineering of the atomic bomb. His impressive work and leadership skills earned him a distinguished reputation of a true scientist and intellectual superior. He created and supported the design for Fat Man, a bomb composed of plutonium-239. This element behaves similarly to uranium-235 and was applied to the bomb testing at Trinity Site and in Fat Man. Later, on July 16, 1944 at 5:30 a.m., the first bomb was tested in Los Alamos Trinity Site, resulting in a positive sample. A year later, on August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was firebombed with Y-12, nicknamed Little Boy, resulting in 100,000 casualties. Then, Japan was bombed once again in Nagasaki with bomb X-10, nicknamed Fat Man, resulting in 83,000 casualties. The bomb's main purposes were to end the war, and they did end the war, but many lives were lost during this process. One aspect that has affected the perspective of the Manhattan Project is the profound fear people had of an atomic bomb. Many historians believe that the government of the United States itself seeded the fear society had of the bombings. The government advertised positive factors of the bombs, yet hid the negative impacts such as the atrocious after effects of radiation. Later after the bombings, the Soviet Union began developing a similar weapon. Conflict was then born between the United States and the Soviets. This conflict came to be known as the Cold War, a period of 51 years, from 1947 to 1991, of constant threats between these two nations. During this time, societies questioned their safety and whether they could possibly die due to a Soviet bomb. But why does it matter to people in the 21st century? How does the story of the creation of a feared weapon affect history, and more specifically, us? The Manhattan Project had both positive and negative impacts throughout history. At first it seemed like a negative twist, but it actually provided the world with many positive advancements. Some of these advancements are in the scientific area, such as discovering a new and more eco-friendly way to generate energy, known as nuclear energy. Another advancement is how, at the time, it brought people together and allowed a number of ideas to flow through different minds, a lot of which we continue to hear today. The Manhattan Project allowed the exchange of scientific ideas, theories, and experiments, the encounter of a new perspective of science, warfare, and weaponry, the exploration of a nuclear weapon that changed the course of history. It all started with a highly exclusive, top-secret idea. The intention of this idea was to end war and save lives, but it was converted into a method of revenge that ended up introducing a new age of fear and killing thousands. The Manhattan Project. More than just an explosion.